Welcome to the May edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda, your host, and on this month we have a film-packed and interview-packed show reviewing new release films such as Sinners, The Good One, The Surfer, and Make It to Munich. Plus, quite a few interviews on the show, including an interview with the heads of Filmhouse, White and Andrew Simpson, who share the latest on the opening of Edinburgh's beloved arthouse cinema, coming very soon. Secondly, I have a chat with Beatrice Minger, director of the docufiction film E1027Eileen Gray and The House by the Sea. And I also chat with Ciaran Lyons, who directed Tommy Monster, a Scottish film making its rounds around UK cinemas at the moment. It's a good one, so stay tuned. Also, don't forget to sign up to our Substack, Cinetopia Recommends, our weekly list of all things film in the Edinburgh-Glasgow area. An extension of the show, but a full list of what we can find to recommend you to go see and do as part of the film community. If you have a film event or an opportunity, you need to share it with us, so please submit it, and we'll share them weekly. And on the 29th of May, we are running our regular networking night. It's going to be at the Blackbird Bar in the Courtyard in Edinburgh, weather permitting. We have some exciting news we want to share then and there, so I hope you'll join us for our regular informal networking get-together. RSVP, please, but remember, it's free to attend, so hope to see you there. All right, so it is our May edition, and we're back with one of our regulars, Clara Strachan. Clara, how have you been?
I've been good because as a Scottish person, I've been exposed to sun, so it's kind of had like an inverse Gremlins effect. And emotionally, I feel like I'm able to survive
Yeah,
because of that. So
it
that's nice. I feel many others will feel the same.
I've had over the last few years a mixed emotion over this sun stuff because I try to run film events and thus nobody comes to film events. But I've given
Yeah.
up running film events, I think after the month of May. Or if I do, they're just outside and networking so that I can fully appreciate the emotional like positivity
Benefits.
that the sun comes. So yeah, no, it's been glorious, and it's why, yeah, it makes the city look so great, and yes, very happy about that. But I've been in dark rooms for the last couple days because I've been watching all these films. So we're gonna talk about 4 films that that are currently out in cinemas around the UK, and the first one globally is out, making a big, huge box office as Sinners.
I've been all over this world. I seen men die in ways I ain't even know was possible. Love you, brother. Be careful. I will. With all the things that I've seen, I ain't ever seen no demons, no ghosts, no magic. Till now. Now get back inside. Let me in, man.
Basically, Sinners is a really genre-bending historical drama horror set in the Deep South in the 1930s, and it follows 2 brothers trying to start again by setting up a juke joint with their very talented cousin. Some may say supernaturally talented cousin who plays the blues. And yeah, it's. I remember seeing the trailer to this movie in the cinema, and I remember the beginning of the trailer. I was like, okay, yeah. And then suddenly I went off the rails and then became a vampire movie, evidently. And then it was sort of just suddenly a bit more compelling just because it was all a bit insane. And yeah, I respect that, and that respect carries through because I had a really great time watching this in the cinema, actually. Yeah, it was really fun, despite the extremely dark themes and backdrop of the story.
Yeah, I would say the same. But I didn't see the trailer. It takes a while for it to get into the vampire movie, you know?
Mhm.
So I think we were like 35, 40 minutes into it. I mean, there was some ominous elements, but then I was like, when is this gonna turn? And then I was like, oh yeah, here we go.
Here we are.
Yeah.
We've turned.
And then it goes on a whole nother ride. But yeah, I really liked the pacing of the film and really, I mean, obviously at the beginning you kind of get a hint that something the day before, the day before was quite traumatic for one of the main character, the Sammy. But yeah, it takes a while to get there, and I think there's something really nice about that too, because I think you're getting a bit of a character development about the whole everyone who's in the room, and what their motivations are and their connections and all that kind of stuff. So it really does help when they either turn into vampires that they have to, you know, one has to pierce to the heart, or
Yes.
they save. They're saved.
He really respected the conventions. You have to give it to him with that. But no, yeah, I really like that it plays out over just a really set time period. I really enjoy films that do that, where an extremely dramatic event or series of events takes place and irrevocably changes the fate or the destiny of every person involved. And I love that. It's such a compelling start point as well, that these two gangster brothers arrive back in the South, having tried to make it work in Chicago. And then mysteriously, under mysterious circumstances, return with their heavy reputations slung over their shoulder to try and make it work um, with this juke joint. And yeah, I love that. It felt a little bit like Dusk Till Dawn, which I'm a big fan
Mm.
of. Sort of like things go down within the club out in the middle of nowhere, and the drama all unfolds on that night. Um, and there's that blurred line. So like you're in like a house of sin, as it were, like a lot going down, and then it sort of blurs the lines. It's like, who's evil? What's going on?
Yeah.
I love it. It's really brilliant. I know. I think it's unique in the sense that, yeah, it's sort of a film of two halves. So like the drama at the beginning, the historical drama at the beginning, and then moving into the horror at the second half. And I listened to Ryan Coogler talking about the movie, and his sort of resentment when it comes to genre. He said that he loves genre cinema, but he does not love the concept of genre itself.
Mm.
And in that interview, actually, he drew parallels between the fact that historically music was a really segregated industry, and like every black performer was just categorized into race music. And I think he's really sort of acutely aware of genre and not wanting to pander to different genres, and also kind of wanting to break out of like the very restricted like horror genre. But I mean, obviously we've been seeing that happening in the last like decade. Like horror has made like a real comeback as a respected genre, and a really broad with a really broad appeal. So it's interesting actually that Ryan Coogler's agent is the same agent as Robert Eggers, and they're like friends. And they both made a vampire movie in the same year.
Yeah, and very different ones, aren't they?
Yeah, totally. But yeah,
I,
Ryan
I,
said that he really respected Eggers in the sense that he was really committed to like the um portraying the lore correctly, even
mm,
though obviously with Nosferatu, like he really smashed together like two different stories, but of the same kind of like his like legend, pushed them together. And like Ryan Coogler's was really keen to make sure he did that. Like what actually started like the kernel of inspiration, the inception of the concept of the film, wasn't so much, oh, I'm just going to do a vampire movie. It was more like he was listening to blues music, and he was sort of mulling over the concept of the legends of blues musicians who had sort of like a Faustian pact
mm,
with dark deity figures, not necessarily the devil, but more like a Papa Legba figure, which is more of a mischief maker character, but is often referred to as the devil in music, just as like like a transmutation of different cultures and perceptions of otherworldly things. So I started off as that, not so much as a vampire film, so it's a little bit more interesting, I would say, because you're dealing with a trope for sure. Like they're still getting stakes through the heart, but like at the same time, there's much more. It's more culturally rich because
yeah.
he's done research, and he was embedded in the area at the time and spoke to a lot of people. He like loves a consultant apparently, and they were really making sure that he had the correct things to say, and the script is well written, and So yeah, which I really enjoyed when I was watching.
It's one of those films that I didn't know what to expect, but I just felt completely enraptured in the environment and the story and the people, and I could totally see that there was a great deal of research that had been done, and also really appreciated the idea of like mythicalness of those spaces, and there's a moment where like different generations of music sort of come in, and in the club, and I liked it. I liked the elements of like tradition, and yeah, and the lineage of it, and sort of celebration of that music. So already I was very into it. And then I'm not a huge vampire. I said that with the Nosferatu. It's not it's not my genre. And if I tend to like the ones that were made by like Only Lovers Left Alive, and like Jim Jarmusch
Yeah,
versions of vampires and whatnot. But that being said,
it's a
I
broad church, Amanda. It's a broad
I
church.
know, I know, but I'm getting more into it, and I think Sinners is up on the list of one of my favorite vampire films. So yeah, it was a great. I think it was a really great experience. I feel like it was a popular film that was clearly smartly made, and also there's a lot of layers there.
I have to say also, I really enjoyed the fact that it was funny.
Yeah.
Like I like that. Didn't take itself too seriously throughout, which you really need. So there's some really like off the wall moments of just like utter balls to the walls, like violence, and like some like funny moments like smattered throughout, which I really loved. Like I mean, also the fact that there's like the Irish vampire, which is acted so, so I just thought, oh man, there's so many scenes we were I were just laughing as much as we could without being absolute dickheads in the cinema at those moments.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the little Irish dance that he did. Yeah.
They're so funny. I'm not gonna lie though, at the editing, like at the end, the editing really started to grind on me. I was like, "What's happening? Why are you doing that?" Like it was a bit chaotic and a bit kind of like repetitive at the end. Like, and I was like, "Okay, those were some interesting choices that were made." Um, but yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed it, and I'll definitely watch it again when it pops up on streamers.
Did
Because
you
it'll
say
get
you
me
had
hot.
some criticism apart from the editing, or was that your main criticism?
That's my main criticism, is just that it was a bit chaotic at the end. It felt slightly like an extended music video with the
Mm,
cuts and the editing. I feel like, and it was just sort of a little. It felt like there was a struggle for the choice to figure out the way things fell with regards to what we were allowed to see with what transpired that night,
mm.
what happened, and then but yeah, no, but other people disagree with me, so yeah, see it and make of it what you will, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point I was like, uh-oh, how are they going to get out of this? And it worked enough because it just quickly got through that, usually that main fight scene that tends to happen in these kinds of films. So it didn't bother me too much. Just overall, I just again think it was really I just felt like so immersed in this
Yeah,
story and this environment, and very few films really take me there in a way that I haven't felt in other films before. And I feel like I've never seen a film like this before. So it felt special in that way. And certainly I've been thinking about it since. So, but yeah, a lot of people are talking about it, enjoying it, having fun in the cinema, watching Sinners. So, I
well, he's come a long way from Fruitvale Station, and I'm happy that he's having fun with it. And he's making the movies he wants to make. Good for him.
Yeah, and so that is Sinners, and it should be out in cinemas right now. Go see it in a cinema if you can, because it is one of those to see with other people. And yeah, check it out if you can.
Come on. Woohoo! We love this.
Dad,
Can you get in the back?
why do I have to go in the back?
Because I'm asking you so nicely.
What's my son so angry about?
His parents' relationship ending?
Are you eavesdropping on us back there?
I'm literally a foot away from you.
I don't think I've ever seen you eat this much.
This is a regular amount of food.
I didn't even know you ate meat.
Yeah, I thought you were a
I've
vegetarian.
never been a vegetarian, Dad.
You seem like one, though.
I'm going the speed limit.
You're actually going 5 miles over.
I'm not, and you always go like at least 10 over.
That is my privilege as father.
She's a better driver than you, man.
That's because I taught her.
Damn, that's heavy.
You're joking.
What?
Well, we are hiking all day.
Yeah,
So it's going to be a lot heavier after an hour or 7.
I'm fine.
All right, so the next film we're going to review is Good One. It's directed by India Donaldson, and it stars Lily Collins, James LaGrosse, and Danny McCarthy. It's about a father and a daughter who take a camping trip, and they bring along their father's best friend, and supposedly potentially the son as well. But there's a fight that happens, so it just becomes the two older men and Lily on their route from New York to the Catskills, and they take a 3-day camping trip, and many conversations happen in between the two men, mostly about how their lives are. I guess they're both going through divorces or had gone through a divorce, and one of the dads basically calls Lily, as she's a very smart and quiet, but smart and sort of observant young 17-year-old. Good one. So, but interesting things happen. Yeah, so somewhat uncomfortable and whatnot that happen on this little journey. But I'll leave it at that and ask Clara what she thought of this film.
I really loved this movie. I thought it eviscerated me by the end of it, which is quite like a strong word to use considering how mellow it is, and how sort of like modest and casual it is until the heart of it, the core of the film really unfurls at the end. Yeah, I'm trying to like I'm looking at what I've written and thinking about it, but I'm just like actually really furious because I'm just remembering all these terrible reviews that I've seen, like seeing a bunch of men leave on the internet, which is never good. Don't read things that men write on the internet if you want to be happy. But I did that. And yeah, I don't think there's a lot of understanding around it because it's very much a movie about being a young woman and being a woman, full stop, I would say, in a very, very subtle sense. So basically it's a road-ish movie, yeah, about traveling and spending a lot of time with people in circumstances which you aren't usually, and what is revealed about each other's character when you're put in those kind of situations. I think it really reminded me of Janet Planet, which if anyone saw that recently, it has that really sort of understated but really gorgeous, low-key sort of inspection of really close familial relationships. It's a kind of coming of age film in a really understated way, and I'm trying not to like give any spoilers about it, but it follows basically a painfully emotionally intelligent young woman and her sort of hapless, not so emotionally intelligent father,
Yeah.
and his best friend, as she sort of carries them and sort of navigates them and their boorish, like rude way of communicating and their way of being. You're really locked into her experience of existing in a world which we all do or have done at some point, which is dominated by the men in your life who are older and think that what they have to say is super valuable.
Yeah.
And really and much more valuable, yeah, just more valuable, and are pretty boorish about how they do it. Yeah, it deals with the friction of relationships and the schism between who we are and who we think we are, and how we navigate other people who are also dealing with that, but very poorly. It traces these like really well-worn casual cruelties that are so commonplace in family relationships and just relationships in general, unfortunately. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess one other mention too is that Sam is a queer young woman and sort of is I mean, I guess that's known to the men, and so there's also this sort of coming of ageness of her, but like dealing with this kind of older male perspective that sort of comments on it, and it's just it's very like I mean, like it's icky in lots of ways. There's some ickiness to one of the characters, obviously. It makes, I have to say, like there's a creepiness to just the way that it's being filmed that and I know I believe, Clara, you're a big hiker and whatnot, and I admittedly like spent 10 years trying to be like living in Vermont and whatnot, to be really into the outdoors, but like I'm just not. Like after 10 years of trying, I'm just not. So I just fully feel like this film clarifies to me that camping is creepy. Like it can be
I
creepy.
actually I have that written down. I wrote classic camp anxiety is whether or not whether another group will turn up, pitch next to you, and like alter the dynamic or potentially ruin your vibe, and like how the vibe is going to be generally, even with the people you chose to come with.
Yeah, no, it brought me back to this one night when like there was we thought we were the only people in the woods, and then there were lights, and I was just so frightened and never wanted to do it again. But yeah, so I mean, camping is creepy, but particularly yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I read but I totally connected with was the fallibility of your like, I mean, there was a father-daughter relationship that I think was, I mean, it wasn't in some ways positive, or like their attempt to sort of navigate this relationship. I mean, again, she's more comfortable to go on the trip and to be with her father, who is, had, went through a divorce with her mother. But then as the story continues, it feels like a sense of unreliance on your parents, and the kind of, that moment in time when you realize that you maybe can't rely on the people that you want to, and how scary that is, and while you're coming of age. And that I think is a really powerful, without, like I said, giving away too much, it's just a really, really powerful, quiet look on father-daughter relationships. And the whole film is quite quiet, and it's quite meditative in lots of ways. There's lots of like, very beautiful shots of the Catskills. I mean, I'm just like, I was very nostalgic for both the New York film scenes and that, like the outdoors of the Catskills, which, not to say I spent tons of time there, but I spent enough time to be, to be nostalgic about it. And so there is those elements of that, but then, yeah, it's very, very, beautifully shot. It makes it's quiet. It's how you feel when you're in the middle of, there's not much spoken sometimes, when you're sitting there spending 3 days with people you spent your whole life with, and maybe or whatnot. So I like the pacing of that, but I also thought it was poignant in its the story and the emphasis of that.
It hit me like a ton of bricks, like how with its subtlety of with the subtlety of the revelations, which is just like a remarkable skill with regard in filmmaking. And yeah, it just captures with this horrible, brilliant clarity the nuance of relationships. And it's not relationships aren't the arcs that you see in films. They're just not. The resolutions aren't there. Like they keep going once the film is ended, and that is just so true. And how do you deal with that? But yeah, the film is just so beautiful as well. I thought meditative is a really great word for it. There's lots of space in the film to sort of ruminate and process on what's happening and what you're thinking, and that can bring up memories. Like that's why I think it's so evocative, is it leaves you, it doesn't hammer you over the head with plot points and too much dialogue or too much going on. It's just enough to destroy you.
Yes, right. Exactly.
It's
so
interesting because it brought up the bear debate as well. Like, have you heard of the bear debate? There was this thing doing the rounds on the internet recently where someone posed the question to like female hikers or just women in general. It's like, what would you rather run into in the woods? Would you rather run into a bear or a man? And then everyone, or all the women chose the bear. And then men were obviously up in arms. They're like, what do you mean you choose a bear? That's absolutely insane. Do you not know that a bear can tear a man apart in 2 seconds? And then it was just, so there's a lot of that. So that I brought up that because I just, given that there's mention of a bear in the film, and it's just, it was brilliant.
Amusing. I really did. I'm out of the camping world to not know the bear. I don't know the bear debate,
I
but
don't know. I've never had to deal with the reality of a bear.
I have. But yeah. But yeah, no, it's and crocodiles, or not crocodiles, and alligators and all those sort of things. But
And things, much to think on, if that
yeah, I
question.
mean, really, really good film. It also kind of reminds me, I mean, there's so many really interesting independent films like coming out of the States that we don't always get to see in the UK, and this is one of them. And I'm really happy that Conic picked it up and as giving it a UK release. But it reminds me of a lot of like indie films I used to see when I lived in New York, and just really, it's a fantastic film. It looks good, it's well acted, and it's creepy. It's creepy, and yeah, I highly recommend it. Okay, and that's the good one, and it's out in cinemas on the 16th of May.
You can't stop a wave. Born in a storm, way out to sea. Pure energy. And it's all building to this breaking point.
Oi! Locals only!
I grew up here.
Don't live here. Don't surf here.
Hey, Dad.
It's okay. You're scaring my boy.
Now. No need for all this fuss. Listen to me, brother. I know it's smart to lose face in front of your boy, but you gotta know when to back down, or it could get a whole lot worse.
Starring Nick Cage, The Surfer, directed by Lorcan Finnegan, which we actually interviewed during the COVID period. We interviewed Lorcan on the show. So Clara, tell us about The Surfer.
Well, where to begin? I suppose, well, firstly, I should preface that by saying I love it. Yeah, so The Surfer is a classic Nick Cage job, which will say a lot in and of itself. But basically, the crux of the film is it hinges on a man who is from a corporate background who decides, nay, rests his entire happiness and sense of self-worth on buying a cliff-top home above the surf spot, which meant so much to him as a young man. And then his run-in with the extremely macho, masculine, locals-only surf spot kind of cult that run the beach and rule the beach with a fist of terror. So basically, Nick Cage's character is desperately trying to come and close the deal on this house, and he just wants to take his son surfing. It's as simple as that. This man just wants to take his son surfing, and he cannot do it because it's a locals only beach, and they will stop at nothing to stop him from surfing. And Nick Cage will stop at nothing to have them let him surf with his son. And from there, it's just a wild, crazy, torturous, visceral, insane, mind-bending trip roller coaster into the depths of insanity, pretty much. It's sort of like, it's like Mandy meets Point Break meets some kind of like indie surf movie is what I wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm sensing you didn't like it, Amanda.
well, I didn't even, so I mentioned this directed by Lorcan Finnegan because until the end credits came out and I was like holding on to my chair like in pain from having watched this film because I thought it was, I don't know, I think it was more of like a body horror, more worse than like Titan for me. So I found it very, very, then I realized, oh, Lorcan Finnegan, the guy who made Vivarium, which during the COVID pandemic felt so like was so freaky to me and like so uncomfortable and like honestly it was made before, but we watched it like the first 2 months of the lockdown, so there was this like feeling of being stuck in this really insane world and he had made with Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots. So then it made all the sense in the world with this film, which the whole time I was just like, go away. Like they're telling
I
us
know, leave the beach.
like
Nicolas Cage.
there are so many ways that we can go away, come back, like solve this later. You have
It's
work
so
in the
good.
morning.
I thought it was so good. It was such because essentially it's a send up of like really masochistic like masculine cultures,
Absolutely.
which I love, and it takes that concept like to the nth degree. It takes that, it really builds it up. So the leader of the locals only kind of like gang, um which I love. Like without this, I don't think it just the point would have been a little bit much less powerful. And the leader, you find out his background is he's sort of a guru for corporate men,
Yeah.
men and women, but he says it's more of a male problem, for male corporate leaders to come to him so that they can be broken down into little pieces and then built up to
Yeah.
strengthen them and make them better men. And that's his whole shtick. That's how he gets all his money. So he's essentially a surfing yuppie. They're all surfing yuppies who are powerful men in their community who just love bullying people on the beach and violence and surfing. It's so this film is actually like an Australian and Irish co-production, which I find really interesting. So it's interesting to see because Australian culture and Australian surf culture and Australian like macho culture is very specific and very like distilled. So it's really it really helps push that story to the nth degree. It's just it is so violent, it is really gory, it is unhinged, but it's also hilarious. I thought, I mean, if you have a dark sense of humor, I suppose it's hilarious. But yeah, it's also quite cosmic. It kind of felt like because you're dealing with like bending time and space and your perception of reality, and you're not entirely sure where the line of reality is in the film. You're not
Yeah.
entirely sure if there's something more supernatural at play with regards to time, or if it's just you're going into the madness of Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said cosmic as much as psychological, and
Yeah, I suppose.
and it really, yeah, it was a psychological thriller to the umpteenth degree mixed with like body horror. But I also did come out of it being like, this is a metaphor of what's wrong with the world right now. Like just in general. I don't know, but there's just there's something about it that's
cosmic element came in, because it's like cosmic in the sense of like I earn like 50K and I work in an office, but I take shrooms a lot and that makes me a really deep person. Like, that kind of sense of cosmic, like this sort of faux this faux connection to something bigger than yourself that like a lot of these bro kind of type people have, or these kind of like corporate people have, that they think, they're creating these little rituals, these worlds, and these kind of like experience.
But yeah, I mean, I found it really painful. I found it like I found the surfers creepier than the vampires. And
Yes.
so like I didn't expect it, and sort of picked this one to see over the Warfare, which you had seen and suggested, because I wanted less after vampires I wanted a little less something funny, which I agree it is funny and it was really well done. It's just now I know that this director really knows how to like make you feel like suffocated and like isolated and like different kinds of environments, all well put together. But like I've never felt like so suffocated on a beach in my entire life until this moment.
Yeah, and also funnily enough, another tale of poor fathering.
Yeah.
Rooted in selfishness and poor listening skills.
True.
Also, it's interesting that he was that Nick Cage is in this, given that he was in The Wicker Man, because it kind of at times felt kind of Wicker Man-y, like an sort of an outsider coming in and then being pushed to his limits, tested, gets a little bit.
I never saw that Wicker Man. I saw the original Wicker Man, but I've never seen the second one. Yeah.
One word, Amanda, bees. There's so many great like lines you can take away from this if you go and like with your friends. There's gonna be so many more Nick Cageisms that you can pull from it. Like it's really great.
Yeah, it's its own genre, right? So it's its own, the Nick Cage movie. We, shout out to the Cagerama team from Matchbox that used to run the Cage Film Festival. But yeah, he's got certain kind of film, and they're all really. But I think it's an interesting sort of thing for someone to make a film with Nick Cage in it now. It was enjoyable if you could get over the pain
Yes,
you've made me
prolonged
feel.
suffering
Yeah.
of Nick Cage. Yes, the prolonged and relentless suffering of Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Luckily, speaking of the good weather, I was actually in that screening alone because it was really sunny and it was like in the morning. So I got to react to it, which I think let me kind of like blow off a little bit of steam. Like I feel like if I wasn't able to go like, oh, like, oh God, and like, like react to it, then I might have been a bit more like, turn onto my seat. But yeah, you kind of wish that his character was even more terrible person though, so you could kind of like think he deserved it more. But then it sort of resolves itself by the end, which I love. Because I there was several points throughout the film where I thought I wasn't sure if I was going to get the kind of payoff, like the satisfaction. But I think it does really well. It sort of wraps up very nicely. It's very satisfying and it's just insane. Also, I think it has a few. It makes a good point, a good satirical point about homelessness and class and poverty, and I think it really puts you in a place of you're experiencing the world as somebody who has sort of like dropped off the ledge and through the cracks into being homeless or being facing mental illness like on the street. Yeah. So I think it was actually had a bit more depth to it than it would initially seem for the way it's sort of marketed as a sort of insane Nicolas Cage movie. But yeah, I think it was really well done though. It was really it had this sort of strange like 1970s kind of like Kodachrome quality to it, and like
Yeah.
which I thought was really just like visually enjoyable. I enjoyed that as well. So
Yeah, no, and I actually really agree with you on that. I had those feelings of the portrayal of homelessness and also just I mean I think and like the psychological
just the nightmare
nightmare of that and whatnot, but it definitely yeah, it was interesting, and I'm glad I saw it. But like I said with the previous Lorcan Finnegan film, I don't think I want to see it again. So I will skip the second screening of that.
So I just realized like I was listening to a podcast in the car with my friend the other week, and it was talking. There was a woman's experience of being in the lineup, like a surf lineup, and then her experience with really aggressive men in the lineup, and like one actually like pushing off her board and like assaulting her several times when she's trying to get in a lineup, and she was trying to like spread the word, and they were trying to be like, oh, there's this like this misogyny and this like toxic masculinity, to like use a really like totally worn in phrase now. Yeah, so like from that point of view as well, I think it takes on that as well. So I thought that was very interesting. The idea of a surfer is like a mellow kind of like right on. They just flip that on his head and just go, ha.
Yeah, we did a whole series about things to do in LA, and there's this really famous Malibu beach, and they have this whole like rule and ritual. So I mean, I totally got that it was based on this very key way of how they control the beaches and who can come in and who can't, and like and all that, and the territorialness of it. But I just it's a little bit like the camping and the surfing. Those aren't things I actively do. So like in my brain, I was like, just go away. Like find another beach. Like it's gonna make us all happier. But you wanted to stay there. I wanted him to go away.
It's a tale of folly and hubris. Right.
Exactly. I don't have that kind of pride. If someone tells me to go away, I run. Like I
like
run
that beach was his whale. It was like Moby Dick.
Get off the beach. All right, so The Surfer, it's definitely a film to check out. So I'll hold on to your seats if you're me. But it's currently out in cinemas as well.
A 17-year-old from Scotland is seriously injured after being hit by a vehicle in Batavia. The Genesee County Sheriff's Office said Ethan Walker was struck as he was walking along.
I want to inspire others to just do it instead of hesitate and then worrying about what will happen.
I mean, you think he's cycling down to the shop, Cycling all the way to Munich.
All right, so the next film we are going to review is Make It to Munich, a documentary film by Martin Robertson, who did Ride the Wave. And this film is about Ethan Walker, promising young Scottish footballer from Aberdeen. He went to New York State to get a football scholarship and tragically got hit by a car and suffered some very serious life-threatening injuries. So when he came back to Scotland, he was working with an orthopedic surgeon, Gordon Mackay, and they took and after a few months of rebuilding his knee and getting him back to life, they decide to take a road trip on bike to the Euros, which the Scottish football team was playing in Munich. So they ride their bike all the way there. So which is, it's quite a big journey. And I get from the film as well, there was a huge amount of like people following on GoFundMe, and so there's a big big support of of the story. A really lovely young man, Ethan Walker. So we spent a lot of time with him and his doctor as well. So and the filmmakers and the team that sort of support this. So yeah, definitely a biking road journey film. And Clara, tell me what you think about this film.
I mean, it's always really reassuring to hear a good story when so many films are really struggling to sort of reveal terrible things that we all really ought to be aware of, or sort of like lift the lid on awful, terrible things. So it's actually quite nice to have like a heartening documentary, which is just sort of straightforward and sort of about a young person who's just able to kind of push themselves to achieve something. So like one key quote is from Ethan is that he said he wants to inspire others to just do it rather than worry about what could happen. And I think that's a really good takeaway from the film, is that like just this guy went through a lot physically, and then probably, albeit under the advisement of a medical professional, decided to go and do something pretty strenuous just because he really wanted to do it. And yeah, that's a really good takeaway, I suppose. And yeah, I like a road movie, and I definitely think this constitutes a road movie. So the crux of it is basically like they're on a mission to deliver the pennant, aren't they? So they're bringing this Scottish pennant so that they can the Scottish team can walk out with it on the field on match day and switch it over. So it's like a symbolic journey, which I like. I like a journey movie. Even though it was a completely crippling defeat for Scotland in that match.
Yeah, well, we all knew that was going to happen.
I know, so it's going to happen. So you're just like, oh well. So like, it's good for Scotland that we get to take away something positive from that match, because there certainly wasn't anything happening on the pitch at that point. But yeah, it's interesting though that Scotland did lose. That was kind of the end of it, because ever the underdog, Scotland in that situation, and very much the same for Ethan. Like, ended up as a bit of the underdog. Like, he lost his livelihood, his like passion, unable to play football. And sort of refused that, and thought, well, I'm gonna do something remarkable anyway. I mean, I suppose the film was essentially also just like a long advert for Gordon Mackay's surgical skill, given that he like radically reconstructed Ethan's knee and also suggested the adventure. But again, yeah, like heartening to know that like there's people out there, like medical professionals and like the NHS and whatnot, that are able to like drastically improve your chances and like work with you and like help you to rekindle some kind of a life that you want to live. Also, it captures on film the kind of masculinity that could do to be spotlit and shared more widely. So I really like the idea that like young guys who are into football or might have heard of Ethan's story might watch it or like come across it one day, and then sort of have that good influence, as it were, because it was really nice to sort of see the relationships on screen. Just like it is pretty sort of just normal interactions. A lot of it is just following them on the road and their conversation. But it's nice, but it's quite heartwarming, really. And I think it really covers and approaches like the silliness and beauty and the struggle of life, even though it's sort of like mixed in with the realism. And yeah, and I think also the fact it's tempered from being a too schmaltzy sort of too saccharine, too polished movie by the fact that Ethan is like really highly aware, self-aware of the position that he's in, and he really doesn't want to come off as like a really like the golden boy who gets everything, and it's as if it's like a all a PR stunt. I think the reality is he's just like an extremely competitive person, and like doesn't really take no for an answer. And that's interesting to look at in itself because that's kind of a dangerous character trait. So I think it's interesting that they're quite honest about that. I think Ethan refer to it as like he gets a bit uncomfortable, a bit embarrassed because basically they set out on this journey to go to the match without even having tickets lined up, just sort of in the hope that they'll sort of manage to get them.
But if they're taking the pendant or whatever, they must be getting tickets.
Well, yeah, so they did know, but it's interesting because when you're talking about it, he says like he feels guilty because it's sort of like he's got a cheat code. And he says the cheat code was being hit by a car and then cycling the journey. So he's kind of like, he is aware of what it was going on and he's a bit embarrassed by it. So I think the fact they've included that just makes him more of a likable character and less like sort of like intolerable, like golden boy type person.
Yeah. Well, there was nothing golden about, I mean, he was a great character. He was a good person and it was very inspiring. And I agree with you. Like the rest of the films we saw were about creepy things and and this was the least creepy. And it made me also realize how nice it is to live in Scotland and to be around Scottish people because like everyone was so like helpful along the way, like a really nice group of people who are making this happen and like you said, helping him, and the doctor was incredible. And just a really incredible figure to know that someone cared that much about their patient as well. I do feel like it is a local film, like a film that people in Scotland would appreciate for multiple reasons, for the connection, for connection to football and whatnot. So I think it will probably have a local audience and a local positive response. Not to say that someone wouldn't enjoy it somewhere else, but I do feel like it feels like a particularly made film for a local audience, like a local Scottish audience. To me, I would also say, like you said, it did not feel like a infomercial, which the film I never said last year, but will I guess admit now that I really didn't like from EIFF was The Mountain Within Me, which felt very similar in terms of a story where Ed Jackson was a rugby player and he suffered a severe like spinal cord injury, but then ultimately going up massive mountains in the Himalayas. And that film was really painful for me to watch, but partially because I thought I just can't watch people about to fall off a mountain. It's anxiety inducing, but I also felt that film like was an infomercial for his nonprofit organization. And it just like, it had a lot of money connected to it and also a lot of beautiful scenes, but did not have the heart that this film did. So, this didn't seem like a really high budget documentary, but it had heart.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a really likable character, and I think he's got like a good head on his shoulders, like as a young person who's very like aware of he's aware of how he's coming across. He's aware that he wants to be a good person and like be a good influence and like an inspirational figure in like in a real way, not in a very performative way, which is like a really valuable distinction to make.
Yeah. So, Make It to Munich is currently going on a tour around Scotland. So I think it's Cosmic Cat that has the distribution, but there is a preview happening, I believe, this week. So when this is airing is on Thursday, and I think the preview is on Friday at Glasgow Film with the filmmaker and maybe Ethan. I'm not sure, but you can check it out actually on our Cinetopia Substack. Cinetopia recommends, because we link to it. But look it out for Make It to Munich across cinemas. It was in the Glasgow Film Festival as well as the Surfer, actually. And I remember Simon really, really liked the Surfer. So I was looking forward to seeing the film. But yeah, so Make It to Munich is currently out in cinemas. Will be out in cinemas soon. So check it out. I'm here with Andrew Simpson, Executive Director, and Rod White, Program Director of the Filmhouse, which has exciting news coming up. They're opening again. And Andrew and Rod, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. A pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right, so Rod, you have been part of the Filmhouse for many, many years, and we're part of the core team who has really put that campaign to bring the Filmhouse back through many iterations. Can you catch us up to speed a little bit on what's been going on?
Well, we had an awful lot of things to sort out back in wherever that was. I've forgotten now. October 2022. Which we didn't really know what they were going to be at the time, and we all made a commitment to kind of, give it a year, and a year turned into 2, and 2 turned into 2.5, and throughout that time, various challenges were thrown in our way in terms of, well, not thrown in our way, but were hurdles that needed to be gotten over. In convincing the guy who bought the building that leasing it to Filmhouse was the thing he wanted to do with it, and then finding the money to fix what was a fairly kind of crumbling edifice, really, that really needed quite a lot of money to make it fit for the future. So that's the fundamental aspects of it. It's been it's taken an awful lot longer than any of us thought it would, and there have been times where it looked like there was no way forward, but something emerged, constantly emerged throughout those 2 years, and we now find ourselves on the verge of getting it open again in a very much improved Filmhouse is what everybody's going to find. I do hope they like what they find. There's always a worry that that somebody might not like it, but we'll have to put up with that. But I'm pretty confident it's going to go down rather well.
Yeah, and speaking of improvements, I mean, we've seen in the news there's a 4th screen, and and some sort of like lots of necessary improvements, as you've mentioned. But can you give us a little bit of what the updates might be in terms of structure?
Yeah, sure. So the cinemas in Filmhouse were from a different era, I suppose it's okay to say, and space per, square foot per customer in the cinemas was not exactly all that it could be. So we dropped the capacity in the screens so that people have more room, and we've been able to put in bigger seats as a result of that as well. We have been able to historically there was a whole section of the building that was run by the Edinburgh Film Guild, but they are now, I understand, very happy using a variety of screens around the city, so they no longer needed the space in Filmhouse. So that's all been available to us, and is the area that we have converted into a 4th screen. It's smaller than the other screens, but the fact that there's now 4 as opposed to 3 makes an awful lot of difference in terms of scheduling and the sheer sort of variety of things we should be able to undertake.
Absolutely.
So other than that, it's a kind of, there's a few tweaks here and there to make it more accessible. Particularly Cinema 2 is just, I don't know if you were ever in it before, but there was a set of stairs had to be negotiated. We've removed those, so that's all flat access into there. And for the most part, it's fairly cosmetic, but quite, a lot has been done to make it an improved environment.
That's great.
It is sort of cosmetic in the sort of the bar foyer type areas.
Yeah, no, I mean, Screen 2 was such a great, such a great size of cinema for kind of works that it's great that it's being updated, but so essential, the whole space for the whole film community. Andrew, you come from Tyneside background, so similar art house kind of sort of cinema that has this similar prestige. But also from a programming background as well. What made you want to come and join the Filmhouse team?
Great question. So I've actually got sort of my own long storied history with the Filmhouse in that I lived in Edinburgh in my late teens and early 20s as a student. I got my start in the film industry at the Edinburgh International Film Festival, which is obviously based at the Filmhouse at that time and for most of the last few decades. And I've spent an awful lot of time in the Filmhouse, and it's very much a place where I experienced my original cinematic education as well as my start in the world of actually working professionally in film exhibition. So it's a place that's enormously important to me. I've known the Filmhouse team for many years. Was part of the senior team at a cinema at the Tyneside in Newcastle, as you say. So, very much someone who's been getting a broad sort of base of experience in kind of running an equivalent venue, should I say, and was just enormously inspired by the story of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years. I think what Rod and the rest of the group that have spearheaded the reopening of the venue have done, I think, is really extraordinary. I think there's a story to be told around all of this, which is that, I think oftentimes, when important historic cultural organisations like the Filmhouse go, they really do go. I think in the years since COVID, we've all become a lot more aware of that, and actually to be able to resurrect the venue and to bring it back and bring it back better, as Rod's already hinted at, I think is a pretty profound achievement and something that's really exciting. So, I was just really excited to be a part of that journey, I suppose, and was sort of looking for the next step in my career as well, from a personal perspective. To come back to Edinburgh and to be part of the team running the new Filmhouse is just, too good an opportunity to miss, I think.
Rod, I got the opportunity to hear you to have a conversation with Jim Hickey during the 40th anniversary of
Oh, yes.
and
Yeah.
also got to chat with him at the very beginning of the news of the Filmhouse closing. And one thing that really struck me from both those conversations is how important a hub space Filmhouse has always been to the larger community, just the Filmhouse community. I mean, I spent many time having lots of meetings there as a independent freelance person, but also where you meet people, where you feel comfortable. But I think it's also obviously the program as well. It's really special and unique in Edinburgh, and without it, without a space like that, the film community doesn't have that opportunity. But what do you think makes the Filmhouse particularly special? Maybe and I'm going to ask this to Andrew as well, from a historical perspective, but also now looking forward.
I mean, I think fundamentally it's. When I first came to Edinburgh more years ago than I care to mention, it was an absolutely. It was kind of hadn't been around for very long when I came here, and it was just very quickly, and my life became an absolutely essential place, and the place you went in order to. I mean, I saw, I would go several times every week to watch a film, but I would also use the bar, and there was that very real sense of, not everybody, obviously, but many people there being there for the same reason. It was always a very safe kind of place and a very unthreatening place, and I always liked the way that it was ran, even before I worked there, because of how you could be there without feeling challenged in any way by anyone, and to have that sort of that one place to go where an expression that's often used is about your tribe. I mean, that's very much how it felt, and how we want it to feel. And in terms of the whole idea, and I don't know that that Filmhouse in the later years did this particularly well, but is to make what goes on in the cinemas and what goes on in the rest of the building very much a logical extensions of each other, rather than trying to admit what the organization was and who it's for, and double down on that in every area, rather than trying to appeal to a certain kind of person there and a certain kind of person there. So that sort of is the tagline for Filmhouse used to be, and maybe will be again, films worth talking about. And that was the whole idea of that, was about going to see a film and then giving people the opportunity to sit somewhere and discuss it afterwards. Right? I don't know about you, but sometimes watching the talking about the films after you've seen them is actually more interesting than the films themselves, and kind of you can often get 2 or 3 hits from every film you've gone to see just in the subsequent conversations. And to provide that sort of place that was perfectly aligned to perform that function is definitely what we're trying to achieve this time around. It may not quite have been done as well as it might have in years gone by. So I mean, fundamentally for me, it's just that place to go where people are there for pretty much the same reasons.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we actually got to do a few in collaboration with the Film Guild. We run a doc club monthly, and we're able to do some doc screenings and then have that space afterwards to talk in the bar. And I totally agree with you. I think it's such an important, especially with documentaries, to kind of have like an informal space to chat around films. And sometimes it takes you a couple days to really digest something, but
yeah, it does. Yeah.
But in multiplexes, often I hear people in the bathroom, like afterwards, sort of chatting about it. But I love the fact that we have that bar space, and always have in the Filmhouse, which is such an important part of it. Such a great point, Andrew. What do you think in terms of your experience having worked there in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Filmhouse has always been, I think, a very special space for exactly the reasons that Rod described. I think there's a couple of things to pick up on there. For me, one is around that kind of question of values for an organisation such as ourselves, to provide a space for the communities of Edinburgh to experience the full sort of diversity of cinema, but also to meet, to socialise, to talk about the art that they've experienced, or just come and have a drink or a bite to eat with friends, or a work meeting, as you were talking about. And that's very much part of the social and community mission of an organisation like Filmhouse, and particularly of Filmhouse, I would say. And then maybe there's I think there's something else to it as well, which is around that kind of idea of being a safe place to come. I'll be honest, don't get me wrong, I love going to watch films with friends and having a drink and talking about them afterwards. But one of my favorite things to do in the world is to go to the cinema by myself, kind of on a weekday. And I'll never have another weekday off for months yet, cinema to open. But for me to be able to do that, and I'm very fortunate, with my background, that I'm someone who can generally go to venues and sort of cultural events and things by myself and not feel secure. That's not necessarily the case for everyone. And Filmhouse in particular, but independent cinemas and cultural spaces in general being places that can provide that safe, inspiring kind of experience for people, I think is a really important thing, and something we're really committed to as an organisation.
That's great. And I think one thing that really came across from hearing people at the very beginning, having lost the Filmhouse, is how much it means and how much people really felt ownership of the space. And so that's really, really exciting. And I also love to go by myself, and I feel I tend to cry a lot more, like get more emotional, and
it's the best.
It's a unique experience.
I would say, obviously in my past, I've spent a lot of time watching distributors would send us films so that we could watch them, prior to booking them. So watching films in our cinemas on my own is quite a common thing. And I don't know if there's a nicer thing than sitting in Filmhouse Cinema 1 on your own, watching a great film. I mean, it's hard to beat. It really is.
So I'm very keen to hear about sort of, it's real from my own reading, sort of a collaborative approach to running the Filmhouse coming up, and what your vision is in terms of what we'll see in terms of future Filmhouse. What for us to sort of expect in terms of, what we'll see from Filmhouse cut in the coming years.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll go first. I mean, firstly, to sort of clarify, Rod and I are co-directors of the organisation, but Rod is director of programming. So the creative dimension and the films that are on screen and the Q&As and events and seasons, etc., that's very much Rod's domain and his team. I would say what I bring to the table is, and I do come from a creative and programming background sort of originally, but have, sort of stepped over into other areas of sort of organizational leadership sort of over the years, is someone who is fully committed to delivering the best that a cultural cinema can offer, and actually kind of, stepping in a position where I'm essentially kind of steering everything else, but all very much sort of driven towards Filmhouse doing and being able to do what it is here to do, which is to basically deliver one of the best cultural cinema programs in Britain, and perhaps even more broadly than that. And then otherwise I'll hand over to Rod.
Doesn't mean that if Andrew has some good ideas for the programming aspects of it, I promise him I'll give them proper
Rod, I haven't got any, as you well know,
consideration.
That's fine.
It's actually been the fact that Andrew's like a generation behind me, if you like, but that we both sort of in terms of what we did for a living sort of grew up in very similar environments. So to have two of us feels like full of opportunity, because there's none of, in the very short time we've been working together, neither of us have to ever explain anything to the other, because we actually understand it. So I'm quite excited about that there's not going to be any, from a programming perspective, that I don't anticipate there being the kind of, but certainly fighting for my corner won't be quite the challenge that perhaps it once was. And yes, the fact that there's two of us absolutely tuned to the what we want the cinema to be from that from the sort of programming perspective. So yes, it's going to feel far more kind of unified in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very much I guess it was a real reminder when the thing closed, and then what everybody was saying about it. And if we knew it was, a sort of how the community, as it were, felt about it, but it really hit home to us, like, just, this was more than we thought was going to come out of this. So we've, been fired up and enthused by that. And, Filmhouse was a kind of, had a lot of third-party programming entities, doing their festivals there and stuff. And we're going to try and do even more of that if we can. The challenge is always, it's quite a staff-hungry thing to do. So that's the challenge. But, as much as we're able to do, we will do. And, a whole number of the festivals that worked with Filmhouse before are coming back. Many of them have their schedules worked out for, their festivals in October and November. So, yeah, full speed ahead with all of that. And, they're all welcome, as are new people with good ideas.
And I was that leads me into the next question, but definitely, I guess we were talking about cinema as a third space, and Filmhouse being that third space of safety and comfort and, belonging. But also that this is a cultural institution that has wider, impact in terms of its, educational sort of opportunities and things like that. And so I guess maybe back to Andrew on if there's still that sort of vision in terms of how and the reach that Filmhouse will take. That's very different than a commercial cinema,
Yeah, so I think a few things. I mean, on the specifics of the educational outreach work, that is something that sits within Rod's team, and there's a team member that we've got in place already who's kind of working on that element of the program. But maybe I'll let him talk to that, and I'll speak to sort of the broader point around that question, which is, yeah, I think we touched on it maybe a little bit in terms of that sort of that sense of inclusivity and safety and values in previous questions. So I'd refer back to those. It's really vitally important that, you know, Filmhouse is an accessible space and is able to sort of engage communities in a way that is more involved, I think, than perhaps other purely sort of commercial organizations are able to deliver. And obviously we're a charity with a social mission, and that's reflected in the films we show, the prices we charge, the schemes we run, that commitment to accessibility, the policies that we've got around creating a safe and welcoming and a happy environment for both audiences and for our staff, the wages we pay, you know, so it really kind of flows through everything we do, I think. And that's really important. And then maybe if there's anything that Rob wants to say about the education programs, then maybe add.
With the, I've been keen to previously at Filmhouse, the sort of the educational element sat to the side of programming and was a sort of direct report to the CEO type situation. I've been keen to bring the we don't call it education though, it's learning and engagement into the programming department, and then just make it so that the learning and engagement will be, which was by and large sort of with schools or, you know, private as it were, much more kind of part of the public program to try and kind of, you know, give it more visibility in that way. So the individual charge with that only started on Monday, so we're just you know, planning now how that's all going to come out, and but it's yeah, looking like the right way to go just at this moment in time.
Right. And as you mentioned, Rod, you know, the Filmhouse is the home of many festivals and was obviously the big festival that we all knew of and around the world, but smaller festivals. You know, I've been working with Edinburgh Short Film Festival for years, so I know it was an important home to them, and Take One Action and all of them. So
Yep.
yeah, you mentioned briefly that those festivals are already planning to come back, but are we to expect the film festival to come back as well?
That would need to be an announcement that they make.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that a little bit and say that, you know, we're very proud of Filmhouse's long and very sort of storied history with the Edinburgh International Film Festival. I think there's a really exciting story to be told around how all of the organisations that were once under the umbrella of CMI that all disappeared in 2022, how they've all managed to come back to, you know, existence and fruition and to thrive in the future. The festival being one, Filmhouse being another, which is sort of very soon to be open. It's great that the festival will be returning to Edinburgh again in August, and you know, we hope that association can continue, and that's sort of where we are. I'll be confident enough to say that, Rod, at this point, which is my prerogative to say. So
When can I buy a ticket to the Filmhouse again, and when can I come back? Because I know like everyone's going to be, from our audience, is going to be really interested in knowing those exciting news. And what's the first film that is going to be the first night?
I don't know the answer to that last one yet. We've kind of got to the position where, I mean, we've had a date in our mind for quite some time, but obviously it would be foolish to say it until we could actually guarantee. And there's been a few things got in the way of those dates, so we're just at the point now of re-establishing a slightly later date than we had in mind. I think all we can really say at this point is, I think we can safely say it will be before July.
Great. I mean, very, very exciting for us.
But we will be, I would say, within the next 2 weeks, we will have announced when it's going to open.
Okay,
So it's
great.
not long to wait now.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to talk to us about it. We're really all looking forward to the Filmhouse coming back, and and really appreciate your time on this show.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks a lot.
With this house, I've found a place I've been longing for all my life. A place where I'm protected, but free. I built it with Jean Badovici. We wanted something hidden away. A refuge. E1027. In the 1920s, men built the world to meet their own needs. I wanted to create a space for the woman, and then I could conceive of a different world.
All right, and I'm back, and I'm here with director Beatrice Minger, who made the film E1027Eileen Gray and The House by the Sea. Beatrice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
Well, I honestly have to say that you made a film that was like perfectly for me, because I've been obsessed with Roquebrune, the town, and this story for years, and always looked for films that represent the story. But I thought this film did an exceptionally beautiful story to highlight Eileen Gray as an artist, as an architect, and really captivated me for the way that you did it as well. But I heard that you originally came to the story through wanting to do a film about Le Corbusier, right? And so how did you end up with this particular story?
Yeah, that's true. The producer, Philippe Delacqui, had the idea if maybe he wanted to make a film about Le Corbusier together with the director Christophe Schaub, and they asked me to research it. And I did. And I started, I mean, from the beginning, we had a little bit of a question mark already in our heads, like, what could this film about Le Corbusier be about? It's a man that is incredibly well documented, so many books, films, everything. I mean, we know, and he himself made sure of that too, that he's well documented and curated. And so we stumbled across this fascinating house and this amazing story, and then of course discovered also Eileen Gray. I knew her a little bit from her furniture, mostly, but I didn't know at all what I was dealing with, so to speak. And I entered the gray zone, as the gray people call it, because Jennifer Gove, the curator of the National Museum of Ireland, told me from the very beginning, Beatrice, be careful, because once you enter the gray zone, you never get out of it. And that is what basically happened. So we agreed very quickly that this was the more interesting film, so much more interesting questions to ask, but also maybe look at modernism, look at architecture through the female perspective, through her very specific perspective. And then I started writing it, and Christophe Schaub had to retreat a little bit into the background at some point for private reasons, and then I also ended up directing it.
Oh, wonderful. And you use a lot of archive in terms of not only footage, but in terms of letters and whatnot. So how did you go about finding and working with Eileen Gray's letters to her partner and Le Corbusier and whatnot, and come up with that structure?
Yeah, she made it a little bit hard for us, for everybody who is trying to get to know her a little bit better privately, because as we learn in the film, she destroyed her private documentation, most of it completely, before she died. She made sure that it would be destroyed, because she really made a very strong decision to be kept in our memory through her work and be understood through her work. So also that was also a strong decision that I wanted to take very seriously, of course, and also understand why she made that strong decision. And then I went ahead and just tried to find every little bits and pieces of what is still there. So there's some There are some notes, working notes that we still have. There are a few quotes flying around in the internet. There's the biography of Peter Adam, who knew her quite well. And there's her own text she released about architecture, where she was very, very clear and outspoken, which was a very important text for me. And then, as you mentioned, there are a few letters she wrote, mostly to Prunella, her niece, but also a few more where we could really find a little bit more her, like, let's say, private voice, or her very distinctive voice of being very aristocratic, very also playful sometimes. She had a great sense of humor also with people she was close with. So I took all of that, and also, of course, all the conversation I had with people who are researching about Eileen Gray way longer than I have, and created this amalgam almost of like a body of texts, and then created this this voiceover of her. The whole film is narrated in her own voice. She tells us her story. And then went on and constructed this inner monologue, if you will. But maybe again to the point that she was very clear with her decision not to be perceived private. Also together with the actor Eileen Gray, Natalie Redmond-Clark. It was so important to us that we are finding a way to talk with her voice, but don't get too intimate, don't get too close. Let her have her mystery, her enigma that she cared so much about.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. One thing one thing we like at when we screen films, documentaries, is how to look at genre bending films. Sorry. And you definitely describe this as a docufiction. It feels, in some parts, like part theater with the sets, and like, again, part archive. So how did you come up with this structure in terms of how you wanted to tell this story in that way?
Yeah. I think it was like the impulse. I mean, there are also always different reasons when you're trying to find a form for the film. There are, for sure, practical reasons that there are already documentaries. There's a fiction film. We didn't want to repeat that. Also, we knew that we knew very quickly that we wanted to have cast actors who play Eileen Gray, Jean Maudevici, but also Le Corbusier, and bring them together in an artificial space, in a studio space, because also, of course, we filmed a lot of scenes in the actual house too, but it's a museum, and you have to be very careful not to destroy anything, and you can't film very complex scenes in that museum. And these were maybe more the practical reasons, but then also, of course, we were trying to find a form also with my collaborators in scenography and the DP to, not just tell a different history, like, if you will, her story, but also tell it differently and find maybe another endpoint through a different form that is like Eileen Gray, like crossing borders, blurring borders, coming from documentary into fiction, archive footage, almost seamlessly, creating something new. And also a form that gave us a lot of freedom, especially in this studio space, to use also different mediums. As you say, it's something between a theatrical space, but also a space that is quite abstract, installative space almost, where we could ask different questions also, like, what is space in general, what is the exterior, what is the interior. You can be very abstract when you're far away with the camera, but then also when you close to go with the camera, that you're almost like, there's the illusion is almost like being in her presence, in her orbit, if you will. So we could play with so many different interesting questions, and at the same time also never, let's say, say that we have found the truth, but it's always just a space of also possibility and imagination. It's never going to say like, this is exactly how it happened, but this is maybe how it could happen. And I do feel like there has been a big impulse, I think, in general in my work, to find different narratives, to really be able to tell different stories. But because this person, she is so non-conformistic, non-heterosexual, non-everything. So whenever I tried to push a narrative on her, I failed, because then I found some other piece and realized, oh no, that's not her at all, So I had to invent also the narrative, or adjust the narrative, and not use like, old conformist structures, but really, really, really listen well to what is she really telling us and wanting to tell us, and how can we find this form to also get closer to this,
Yeah, absolutely. And you just briefly mentioned that you were able to film a bit in the actual house, which just has this mythical quality because of what happened, and I was just curious how that came about. I know that it had gone through a renovation about 10 years ago or so. So how were you able to sort of get the rights to film in it, and yeah, just that question first.
Yeah, I have to say the museum, which is kind of a conglomerate between E1027, L'Étoile de Mer, the little bistro that is right behind it, and also Le Cabanon. So this is a whole site, the museum site, that is all intertwined together. And they have been incredibly helpful, and yes, opened their doors actually pretty quickly. We were also interested in filming the renovation there. As you said, there was a first renovation phase 10 years ago, and then they went back because they realized not all the details were correctly done. So they went back and did a whole other run of renovations. And we came in just in the pandemic when they were renovating it, and we just asked them, like, can we just start filming? Because it would be interesting to also see this house in very different states of weather, season, renovation, finished renovation. And then also we came and put all the props in the house to make it a living space, a space that people live in, a space where she would live in, and then later a space where that is invaded by all these visitors, and Baruvisi would live in. And they were very, very open to our ideas, and also to the film. What was a little bit of a different story is filming the murals, because the rights for the murals are owned by Fondation Le Corbusier, and we had to bring them on board also to the film, which needed a little bit of negotiation, because they weren't all too happy with the image that we're portraying about Le Corbusier in the film. But we ended up finding ways to do it with their consent.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that there's still, I mean, because it's such I mean, again, I know this story because I'm fascinated by it, but it is such a clear, yeah, like the thing that he did that was, like presented in history, that they wouldn't be so honest about that fact.
but it is something that there are very different versions about the story out there, and it's very different when you talk to a Le Corbusian person or when you talk to an Eileen Gray person. The narratives vary quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I realized that also early on in my research, and that was also, of course, something that was very fascinating to me. Like, not just, I think, the fact that she didn't leave that much documentation, which leaves out gaps and always opens up space for interpretation, but also that kind of this conflict between these two very different artists is kind of still alive and going on, and I can feel it also in the promotion of the film. It's not resolved at all, and I feel when you go see the villa, the E1027, it's still very much alive, and you can still feel that there is unresolved energy there.
Wow.
Which is, of course, as a filmmaker, that's something that is interesting, that speaks to that you kind of tap into something that is still to be understood, or I don't know if it can be resolved, but to talk about, you know.
Yeah. Well, that is really fascinating, because I was going to ask you what do you think it is about this house, which has been talked about so much and sort of lauded so much, but you've been able to spend a lot of time researching it, but also actually be in this space. And admittedly, I have not been there, which I'm very excited someday to go. But yeah, tell us what you think makes this such an important piece of architectural history, and also, just as you said, maybe an energy that is hard to explain.
It is exactly that. It's hard to explain. It's something only to experience, I think. And hopefully we were able to also show that in the film.
Yeah.
To me, it's very much a house that kind of reaches out its hand and always makes a proposal for a connection. It's kind of, it welcomes you so gently with these enter slowly, sans interdit, entrez lentement, all these scriptures in the house that speak also of a great sense of humor, of course, but also it's like, so every detail is so thought through and makes you again proposal to sit down and rest and contemplate or work. Also have guests. There are all these guest beds and guest bathrooms and visitors. But what makes it so to me different, it's really this kind of trying to find a relationship with you. It's really, it's trying to engage in something with you, and it's asking you to also come and sit and receive this other relationship, this resonance of the house. And I think that is something that also brings me to this violent act of Le Corbusier. He didn't take the proposal.
Yeah.
Came and just took it and painted over it. And I think there's something in this, let's say, outreach, this proposal, this kind of attempt to make a connection that deeply alienated him, fascinated him also, but also there was something there that he couldn't understand. That's also so brilliantly thought through. And at one point he couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And had to destroy it, really, basically destroy it. And be it conscious or unconscious, it's a very, very strong act, and we need to take it seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, I saw a film at IDFA a few years ago about another another artist in the Dada movement that was largely like erased. And I think this story is so important, not only to talk about we now know, like you said, we know Eileen Gray's work. She had a renaissance in terms of, as your film says, like later on in her life or later on in modern history, but no other example do we have of someone who actually fully attempted to like physically erase her work and her and defile it in such a clear way. And I think that's such an important part of this story.
And in an act he chose to make naked painting naked women on the walls. And again, here you can also, you can also argue, oh, well, it was hot down there. Everybody was naked, and painting naked women was the norm, basically. There's no older motive than in art history than the naked woman. And also, you could argue there's a version also, I think, in the film that it was very banal almost. They hung around and he wanted to express himself differently before he really wanted the walls to be very white or at least monochrome. But then he had a change of heart and a change of mind. And here is this great opportunity, and why not take it? It's handed to him, and why should he not take it? And also it speaks to the fact how actually easy it was to cancel women. Nowadays everybody is crying out when we're turning the light around and asking, like, how are men really responsible for their actions? And then everybody's like, ooh, cancel culture. But let's remember that men have been canceling women for I don't know how many 100 years. And it was so easy. It was almost effortless for him.
Absolutely.
And I think you're completely right. It's so important to be aware of the fact that not only he canceled her, he erased her. It was very easy to erase her, but also what he was also erasing with it, it's a completely different point of view on the world, on art, on architecture, that he didn't bear to share also his power with, And I think this also speaks a lot to where we are today, because this happened almost 100 years ago, in a time where really between the wars, so many new things happened. Art exploded, new living forms were invented. Women were choosing between genders and lifestyles, and also there was the Spanish flu just around the corner. There was a big delusion around the war, but also this economic recession and another kind of right-wing push ahead of them. There are so many parallels that I think feel are true also today. Also the machine age, the rise of the machine age 100 years ago. There were literally exhibitions called the machine age. Look where we are today. We are talking about AI all the time, and computers and replacing humans. And again, today, we have right-wing governments who are trying to erase this other point of view that is only saying, let's have relationships, let's open up the spectrum to different forms of life. And they are just going like, no, not anymore. We push back, you have to go back into the hole where you came from. So I do think that in this, it's this this violation, this violent act of Le Corbusier is stirring so many feelings that we also have today.
Yeah.
And that was always also a goal for me, to never have to make the film feel very contemporary. To never be tempted to go like, oh yeah, well, that was 100 years ago, nothing to do with us, and oh, how bad of him, how he acts, look how obnoxious he's, how arrogant. I mean, it's not that different today.
No, absolutely not.
We know, as women, we know these kind of men so well, and we are pushed out of spaces almost every day by men like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really loved this film. I love the way that you used archive and projection and theater and everything. So thank you so much for sharing your ideas.
Also, I'm so glad and grateful that I have found her, because I do think she gave me, with her very strong, distinctive, non-conformative voice, she gave me so much courage also in my own work and writing, and how I make films, how I always value a lot of the process and collaboration with other people. And she was such a really a herring for that. And it's so valuable to rediscover these women as role models, that because there aren't that many around that we could still align with and find courage in, you know.
And hard to find, as you said, because it's either not documented, or in this case you said was some of it was destroyed. So it's just but it's amazing. It's amazing film. I guess I'm in the gray zone as well.
Oh, good. Welcome.
Thank you so much for sharing your film, and yeah, it's out in the UK right now. It'll be in Edinburgh and Glasgow in the next few weeks. So please check it out if you can.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
A client in need of an immediate tattoo.
Fucking hell.
My client is an extremely successful and well-known musician.
You got some murky shit going on.
You are looking after your daughter tomorrow?
I can sense it.
Maybe you're not as brave and honest as I thought you were.
I was wondering. If I could get a selfie.
So hi, and I'm back with Ciaran Lyons, who is the director of Tummy Monster, which is having its UK tour, and it was starting this month, and will be, you can check out all of the locations that they're going all across the Scotland and the UK. Ciaran, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So our team saw your film at Glasgow Film Festival last year and really loved it. So I was really excited to see that there is a UK distribution coming, and many more people can catch it across the UK. But I wanted to ask you, how did you come up with such an idea as Tummy Monster? It's a unique film, very unique.
Yeah, it's a unique film. I've spoken about this a few times. I was in this mindset where I was very determined to be making a feature film with the limited resources that I had access to. So I knew that it was going to have to be done in a very short period of time, because that's where a lot of the expense in film comes from. It's, having all your crew there for all those days. So there's like a necessity, like a practical necessity in terms of what is kind of stimulating the idea, and the idea that I knew that I would be able to do, it felt like it just fell into my lap, because I heard this story I don't know whether it's true, but it was about a certain very famous pop star who showed up in the middle of the night at a tattoo artist's studio, or in reality, he called their home and then went to their studio, saying he needed a tattoo right there and then. And this person who was telling me the story, the tattoo artist had tried to get a selfie with the pop star. Pop star had turned them down. And the person who's telling me the story is, the whole point of them telling it to me is that they're saying this person is a complete arsehole for having turned them down. And what that seemed to me like, there was this like total lack of empathy. You wanted something from this person, and it should be freely given, but when they don't, then that means that they're terrible. And there's the reason that the pop star had turned it down, I guess. In my mind, I was trying to think, well, why is that? And it's to do with the torture of repetition, I suppose. The repetition is a thing of this film, and I did want to use it creatively and artistically, but it is actually also something that means that the very short shooting schedule is possible. So that was something it was in my head before I had the idea that repetition might be something that would allow us to do like a cinematic looking film in a short period of time. And also it helps with the performance in a variety of ways,
Well, but that was leading me to the idea that the story was very much about repetition. That's something I noticed quite a lot. Obviously, there's a few words we won't give away that are repeated multiple times, but also a sense of a little ambiguity in terms of what their intentions were, or what's about to happen, or who's their name. Like, I think the celebrity doesn't. Do you ever really get to know his name or things like that?
No.
So I was also wondering, you come from a horror some of the short films you made before have horror, and what was your idea in terms of the tone? I feel like it's very tense and a psychological thriller, yet sometimes it's kind of funny. So like, what were you trying to go with in terms of the story and the tone?
Yeah, when I was first writing it was in my mind, it's a horror. It was a horror, and there were certain possibilities of where this story can go that makes it more overtly a horror. But in terms of the sort of aesthetic genre leanings and the storytelling sensibilities, and they're just little things which some people will feel and some won't, like the way this character turns up in the doorstep in the middle of the night and the way that he hesitates to come in. It really does have this sort of fairy tale, is he a vampire kind of thing. And we're not necessarily trying to take that out of the realm of reality. But I do want all those echoes to be in there. I think my kind of favorite type of storytelling, it always leaves the door open to the fantastical. It's not necessarily going to walk through the door, but you should feel like something other than cold hard reality could always show up. I think that's where the film ended up. It ended up not being full-blown horror, but I am kind of a
And you mentioned being able to film something that looks cinematic. I think we all felt when we saw the film first how cinematic and unique, with the neon colors and the vaping smoke and everything like that. There's such a mood to your film, and you can't forget it after you've seen it in terms of the look and the feel. It's really amazing. I know you worked with a very specific cinematographer on that, but tell us a little bit about your vision in terms of what the world you wanted us to be in with Tommy Monster.
Yeah, again, it's like it's an automatic and simple filmmaking trick that, if you have the choice between two locations, are you going to pick the one that looks interesting and dynamic and visually rich, or are you going to set it in a beige suburban living room? So it's not an accident that when there was the possibility of this story idea that it can take place in a tattoo parlor, that's really is visually interesting. But the other thing that I really like about that is that this is an environment that this person has created for themselves. The tattoo artist has covered his walls in his own illustrations monsters and like these hellish visions. And in a certain moment, you know, that can be, he can feel that that's quite cool. But then when he can't get out of there, and when it takes on a whole different meaning, he's basically created his own hell.
Yeah.
And I thought that, like, you know, if you were to get kicked out of your house by your partner and you had to live in this other space that you've created for yourself, that you never, you know, what would be the worst place you could possibly live? In a, you know, a tattoo parlor, you know, covered in these horrible illustrations and neon lights. That's kind of part of it. So again, back to your other question, that, you know, it's taking something that's very modern and real, which is like a tattoo studio, and trying to turn that into almost like a horror or fairy tale space. Yeah. So
Yeah, no, and it works so well. And in terms of your cast, I mean, you have Lauren McDonald, who you know, I saw in Beats, and I loved that film, and
yeah, it's a great film.
and yeah, a really fantastic performances from the sort of three main characters and all of the characters. But how did you sort of approach these actors to get on board with the film?
Well, Lauren was the first.
Okay.
And yes, Beats is something I'd seen, and I think a very, very different character.
Yeah.
But he has in that this like real manic energy of someone who. So there is a sort of, there's a similarity in one way to the character, someone who is very flawed and a lot of people will find difficult to be around. But there is a likability, and I think Lauren does that amazingly. Like, you know, the character in this film, Tails, he is a problematic person, and he is, you know, I think we all know someone like this, that you wouldn't necessarily want to be around them all the time, but beneath it all, you feel like there is something good, there is something worth saving there.
Yeah.
I think he does a great job of that. But anyway, so he came in first and sort of was coming in as a collaborator, and did actually work with me on beyond the first draft of the script that he saw, in order to, you know, really wanted to build out the character around him. Originally, when I first wrote it, before I thought about casting, I imagined it being an older character, and then when we turned it into Lauren's vision of Tails, you know, we really wanted to build that around him, around who he could be as this person. And with his kind of support and enthusiasm, I think it made it a lot easier to approach other casting directors, because you've got this, you know, well-respected actor that's committed to it, and that really did help when approaching the other like casting agents. Because Orlando, I think this might have been his first feature project.
Okay.
After he'd just come over to the UK, he just moved here and was starting his acting career here. But he's, you know, he's been cast in so many things since. We were very lucky to get him at that point.
And he's great in that role. Exactly. Like between the two of them, it's really, really fantastic connection and sort of, yeah, completely different characters. But yeah, you're also trying to figure out what their motivations are the whole time. So really interesting.
Yeah. No, we were very lucky to get them, and I have to give a big shout out to Michael as well for Truth, because he's brilliant.
Yes, he's
and again,
great.
that was just someone who I just asked directly. I said, I want you for this role, and when he said yes, it just felt like the puzzle was, you know, falling into place. So
yeah, you talked about a small amount of time, and I did hear that you really only had 5 days to film. Is that largely because of the budget, or how? And how do you how did you make that work? Because that's a lot to fit in 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny talking about it now because it worked, you know. But when you go into this, there was actually there was an acknowledgement that this might not be possible. But I really wanted to try it, and it was the only way in which I felt like I could make a film. I didn't want to be, you know, putting myself in a way. It was difficult. It was very difficult for me to do it financially, but emotionally, it was less bad than some of the shorts that I've worked. Like, a lot of the time when people make short films, there can be favors. You feel like you owe everyone in the world a favor, and it's very emotionally draining to get yourself out from under that. I mean, most people maybe don't care that much, but yeah, I find it very hard. So actually, it was easier on this to feel like, okay, everyone who's here, apart from maybe my best friend and my partner, it's like it's all kind of, there's a professional level which this is happening on, and then that meant that if you're gonna run it like that, it had to be very short. But it worked. I think it does actually suit the story. It wasn't just like taking any old film and saying we're going to do this film in 5 days. I think it actually feels appropriate to have been doing this particular film in such a sort of sprinting across the tightrope kind of way.
Yeah.
It meant that the intensity of interaction between Lauren and Orlando was quite real, you know, because we're shooting their performance for such a large proportion of the day, and the challenges involved in negotiating the repetition element does become real, you know, and I think that's I don't know, I can't necessarily speak to how all actors feel about it, but I think a lot of the time they want elements that allow them to bring some kernel of reality to what's happening. And then it means, from a filmmaking point of view, you know, obviously if there's very stressful things happening on screen, you have to manage how that works. But I think because we were in this shop that's done out like a tattoo studio, and there is this like very real and strange game essentially happening between these two people, it did allow us to move very, very quickly. So yeah.
And when you were in it, did you feel this like, oh, we made this, like it's working, you know, or did you know right then and there, you know, that there's something special here?
Yeah, I think so, because there was a point where, you know, you having to just get through one day at a time, and the number of pages you're trying to get through each day is huge. And you're getting through like the first day, like, okay, we've still got to do this another 4 times, which it feels like if one thing had gone wrong, we just couldn't have got it. Like at one point, I was trying to shoot a 2.5-page scene, and it took like an hour and 20 minutes. And I was thinking, I don't know if we can get back from that.
Yeah.
And that's really fast. Like just because we went 20 minutes over, I was having to be so fast. But once we got through the first couple of days, and there was 1 or 2 key scenes, and yeah, it just, I think with a feature, what feels quite different to a short film is that you actually really feel the characters coming to life independently of you. Whereas I think sometimes with a short film, you just don't quite have enough time for that strange alchemy to happen. Like I now believe in the existence of the character tales in a way, and I could see that happening in front of me. So yeah, as you say, I did feel that. I did feel like this is working. This is feeling kind of magic.
And so was it all shot in Glasgow? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in a shop unit in Bridgeton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to chat with us, but also just congratulations on your film and your tour. And we hope many people see this film, because it's a great film, and we all really enjoyed it. So thank you again.
Well, thank you very much for all your thoughts and for your questions. Thank you.
All right, so that wraps up our show. Just a big thank you to Clara. Thanks for joining, as always. Are you have any future film plans coming up?
Yeah, pleasure as always. Unfortunately, I'm going to be quite basic with what I'm excited for, which is 28 years later. I'm actually pretty excited about it. Some unabashed genre cinema havoc. Yeah.
I did get to see that very cool trailer, and I do know one of the drone operators, so it was very cool to see. But no, that will be good. I'm looking forward to Sheffield Dog Fest, which will be next month. So that's going to be
emails have been rolling in.
Yeah. So lots of interesting films. Their program is out. So and yeah, and check out our Substack when you can, which has all the film events that are happening around Glasgow and Edinburgh. So that's Cinetopia Recommends, and you can see what else is coming out. So thanks again for joining us, and see you next month.